This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Bear Boat Alaska. Up your DIY hunting game with one of their 37-foot adventure yachts. You and 5 of your friends can hunt, fish, set crab pots, shrimp pots, and take DIY to the next level. Bear Boat Alaska is locally owned by a Ketchikan resident who lives here year-round. Call Larry at 907-617-4542 or go to bearboatalaska.com. That's B-A-R-E boatalaska.com and tell Larry you heard about it on this podcast. All right, we're going to have some nice background noise. We got airplanes,
boats,
float planes, boats, a little bit of wind, some
traffic.
Real Alaska. Authentic Alaska.
Yeah, it's good. Very scenic, though.
Speaking of authentic Alaska, we were in some authentic Alaska last week. Does it seem like... Wait, today's Friday, right? So
yeah, today's Friday.
We were back in Fairbanks this time last week after our hunt.
Yes, we were.
Has it all faded? Like the memory, is it been consolidated down to that one shot?
No, it's still fairly fresh. Went by quick, just like we thought it would. It was good.
I think the only thing that didn't go by quick was that hike.
Yeah, that was.
So we should probably start. I have to kind of look at my cell phone to get the days right.
Yeah, get the pictures.
Day one, we get up there, and we went north slope into the flat tundra. Because we had heard that the herd might still kind of be up there, but should be moving south. This is the time of year they should be moving south. And the herd isn't like a huge... There's not 20,000 animals all in the same group. You get these, it's like a territory or an area that you get the animals, and then you find them in small groups, 10, 15, 20, a couple hundred, something like that. So we were hoping to kind of find something like that going on. The plan was to hike past the 5-mile corridor into rifle range if need be. So being willing to do that, which is why I trained. And day one, we weren't seeing much at all. Right. That was day one.
Little, saw a couple little stragglers, small bulls, little spikes.
Yeah.
Stacy and Billy, they were named.
Stacy looked pretty, just kind of gross.
Yeah, losing some coat to hers, I'm not sure. Looked like she had the mange or something going on there.
She looked haggard.
That was the only one we saw that looked rough like that.
Yeah, that was the only one. We saw some other small ones, and the reason why we know she's Stacy, caribou cows also get antlers, and they tend to kind of get their antlers and get a lot of the kind of the fun stuff develop a little bit sooner, and so they just look like a consolidated or a split in half version of a bull. They're not nearly as big, but they still get horns or antlers. And she was around long enough for us to identify. And then we saw the small bull, and so we just figured that was kind of the area to be, and that it wasn't the case.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. So day 2 was when we hiked in, right?
I believe so. Yeah, because we got up there, did all the driving, sightseeing, which it was foggy and rainy on the way up, and then they had construction, so we slowly went through the construction and then set up camp, and then I think we started driving on the second day.
So the 31st was when we got up there, so that was kind of like our bonus day. So we camped that night. So on our first full day was when we hiked out. We saw a couple caribou in the distance, and it looked like there was a little bit of a rise, and maybe behind that we thought there was maybe a riverbank or something like that. So if we got to that rise and we could look down, I was expecting to see the rest of the group that we saw. There was just 2 cows and 2 calves.
Yeah, there was another cow or something. I don't think it was a bull. I think there was 3 cows, and then because there was 5 total, and there was 2 definite calves and 2 definite cows, but I think there might have been either a small bull or another cow.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with another cow.
So as we're heading out there, we're kind of being dainty with the walking. We're trying to hop on the tussocks and trying to keep our boots dry as possible, because if it was 39 degrees that day, it was sunny and a little bit windy, but there were no bugs. We just kind of wanted to keep stuff dry, because it can really change the complexion of a week-long hunt if you get wet and cold the first night. So we were hopping around trying to keep stuff dry with the intent of going all the way out there. And so we're hopping around, and then at some point we get to, it's essentially a river, a slow-flowing river that we couldn't get around. I tried to skirt it a little bit. You kind of went through, and I saw what you were going through, and so I was like, I'm going to go to the left a little bit to where it narrows a little bit and see if I can get through. And these little river networks don't even come up out of, it's not a river. It's just like bog.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a duck pond. It's muskeggy, so the tussocks were bad, but I think Southeast Alaska muskeg hunting kind of gets you used to that. It's not as bad as up there. The tussocks, so you kind of roll your ankle off it. But the water seemed to just be coming from nowhere, and they had 2-3 inches of snow last week, and there had been some rain, so it was just sitting water, and then it just kind of comes up out of the tundra and goes. So it was just wet everywhere, hard to get an idea of where things were and how to navigate that. And there's lakes, so we got split up. You were making a stalk. We decided you get the first shot.
Yeah, you decided that, so I just rolled with it, and I wasn't necessarily trying to just go straight for it, but the little duck ponds that you try to avoid, and what had happened was I was trying to go through the duck pond, and they have these little 2-foot high little bushes that are growing out of it. So I assumed, okay, if that's growing out of it, then that's got to be a high spot, so I can just walk across that. And if I go really fast, then I can probably not get wet. Well, that was definitely not the case. It went up to, I think, just high on my shin, and I was just committed at that point. I mean, my feet were already wet, so I figured, well, there we go. My feet are just wet, so I'm just going for it, because I was halfway through it. If I turned around, I'd still be wet, so I just kept going. But then from there on, I tried to avoid them and go around and stuff like that, but it was freaking wet. It was terrible.
Yeah, and that was the southeast thing. When you're walking through a muskeg, you look for the bushes, and those are the high points, and so that really led us astray. So after seeing you splash around, I thought, okay, well, his feet are wet. I'm going to try to preserve mine. And I had gaiters on, and I got some nice boots, but eventually, you just want to keep them dry as long as possible. Yeah. So as I skirt this, I ended up getting, it seemed like a quarter mile from you.
Yeah, you were always a little dot.
We're trying to figure out how to communicate at that point. I thought, okay, well, he's going to make this stalk. And so I'm staying as wide as possible, because if I came toward you, I would be in their line of sight. And it looked like you were working toward them with some bushes in between. It's like, dude, that's the perfect stalk. For my advantage, that's what it looked like. Yeah. And so I'm going to stay way over here so that I don't spook the caribou.
Yeah, so they were up there on that little rise. They were just feeding and doing what caribou do. And I had some bushes in between me and them, and they were hanging out there for the longest time just in that spot. So I figured I'd just come around, to the south of them, kind of put the bushes between me and them, and I got to 600 yards or 550 yards, somewhere in there, where I ranged the bush, and they must have caught me moving or something, which it's all flat, so I mean, there was no way of hiding. And they saw me, and they just started running. That's when they started running south to you. I figured, okay, well, I guess that's that. Yeah. And there was another river that I was going to have to cross, which I don't think we got to, because after I blew them out, then I just started walking in your direction. So I think I avoided that river. But yeah, so that was the first failed stalk for me. Yeah. And they were just gone.
Once they started running, I thought, well, oh my gosh, here I go. And so there was enough space where I started to move kind of toward them to maybe try to intercept. But again, with the bow, it's going to be way different. I ended up getting a couple of decent pictures as they kind of disappeared over the top, which again made me feel like, dude, we're going to walk to this little crest, and we're going to look down at this basin, and it's going to be just that scene in Dances with Wolves where they come up over the cliff and they look down and there's buffalo just everywhere. That's what it was going to be with caribou, but it wasn't. It was not at all. Imagine an ocean, and with one single wake from a cruise ship, that's the only texture thing that was, and that's what they were in front of and then behind, and then that was it. It was awful. And we got to that point. I was discouraged, but there were a couple mounds of bushes off in the distance. I thought, well, maybe further is better, and that's going to be closer to the 5-mile corridor, so we can just maybe hang in those bushes out there, look like a little island, and see what we can do there.
Yeah, and I think where we bumped them, it was between 1.5 to 2 miles off the road. So to get to the 5-mile corridor, we had to go, three more miles. So let's just keep on going, because we had the intent of just camping. We brought, I think, 2 days of food and then a tent, and we were just going to go out there. And I kept having this optimistic picture of, just like what you said, there was just, we're going to get out to the 5-mile corridor and boom, we can shoot them with our rifles, and there's supposed to be caribou everywhere. And we saw absolutely zero.
It's horrible.
A couple birds.
Horrible.
Yeah.
We got out to those islands and nothing. And it was like a little oasis. Yeah, there's a cool deadhead.
Yeah, you found that cool deadhead.
Cool. But yeah, when we got to that, I thought those were a lot further out. I thought there were maybe little hills, but they ended up being just another small rise, maybe 3 or 4 feet in texture. That was about
pile
it.
Of bushes, yeah.
And that was about it. And we looked around and weren't even seeing stuff in the far distance. So we had opportunity to glass all around us, and all these specks, all these little bushes we thought were caribou weren't. And it was kind of distressing. And at that point, I thought, okay, well, you just got to put in the time. Let's get to the 5-mile point. But I was in the back of my mind, I thought, you can't just choose any point. You can't just walk 5 miles in any direction, get to that 5-mile corridor, and expect it to start happening. So I was getting a little worried, especially as we got further out there, and it was just staying devastatingly flat. Yeah,
very flat. And the whole way out there was, well, not the whole way. I mean, within that 2 miles, there was a few tracks here and there, and but that last 3 miles, there was just nothing. No tracks, no scat. I found an eggshell. That was interesting, about the size of a baseball, but there was no caribou tracks, nothing that we could see anyway. And it's like, should we keep going? But that optimistic picture of, once we get out there, there's supposed to be caribou, and I don't know why my brain worked like that, but they weren't there.
No, they weren't there. So we made the right decision, to not camp out there and not be so optimistic that we were making a bad decision. So we just anger hiked back in, and we went straight line. Everything that we had tried to do at the beginning to keep the feet dry went out the window, because we were already wet at that point. And so again, it's like 39 degrees was the high that day. We were just tromping through.
Angry marching,
shin high. A couple times it got darn near below the knee in the water, just trudging through, get back to the truck, and pissed off. 10 miles through the tussocks, and we didn't really stop. We stopped for lunch a little bit and then a snack on the way back to have some gummy bears to get the energy up. But it was just straight through, tired, turned on the truck, and just ran the heat for a while.
Yeah, I think we put in 11 miles that day.
Yeah, that's weird. It's so different than mountain miles. Mountain miles, you're going up and you're kind of glassing as you go, but this was pretty much just straight walking, because there was maybe stand for a second and just glass around you, but there wasn't anything to see, nothing to kind of distract you from the terrain.
For me, it was like doing high knees on a spongy ground. And short guy, so I have a short leg span, but yeah, it was like doing high knees on spongy ground. And if you stepped on one of those big spongy basketballs, then you were either going to squish into it or probably fall off of it, which I did a couple times. But the tussocks, they were very humbling.
Yeah,
yeah,
no
they
joke.
put me in my place.
So we got out of there, and then we drove around a little. We had talked to a couple people that were there, and they weren't seeing much, and we glassed up what looked like a musk ox on the shore. We'd seen a bunch of those. At that point, we'd already seen 6 or 7. And then a couple, you see something moving in the distance, and your depth perception is all messed up, and so we saw a couple things moving. Thought it was caribou, and it being geese. So there's like 6 geese, and then this root wad that we thought was a musk ox at first. And then we're just kind of recovering, going to close up our tents and pack them up and find a different spot. And this guy and this other guy pull up, and they both have YouTube channels. Won't say who they are, but they start glassing. Oh, we're not taking your spot. I'm like, okay, man.
Thanks for not taking our spot, I guess.
Guy's like, oh, there's a muskox. I'm like, what? And then another guy, oh yeah, there's one. There's another one. Yeah, there's about six caribou over there. Just this sort of like, we are the experts because we have YouTube channels.
Yeah.
So it's pretty funny. And so I looked over there again. I thought, okay, well maybe they saw a reel because we were just seeing, root wad and then geese. And so I look over there and I'm like, yeah, it's root wad and geese. That's
well, yeah. Before they showed up, we were glassing over there, and I thought I had saw something, but just the way the root wad was, and I never did pull out the spotter for it. And I was like, I don't know. It could be something. It's not moving. One of those things. And so then they show up, and they not taking your spot and did the whole thing there. But then it's like, okay, if they saw them, then that reassured me that okay, my eyes were not playing tricks on me. So then let's go pull out the spotter. Pulled out the spotter and the stumps and all sorts. They didn't know what they were talking about. Yeah. Hand holding binos and assuming that we didn't see the caribou stumps right in front of us.
Well, they have geese. YouTube channels. They're experts.
Well, the one guy I think was an expert in his own mind. The other guy seemed tolerable. I'd say the one guy, definitely a genius in his own mind.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So as we got out of the flat tundra into the first ripples of foothills that become the Brooks Range, we found there's this campsite that has a bathroom, which is it seems like the first maybe stop for trucks that are headed south. And we were talking to, I don't know if it was this day or the next day, but we were talking to a guy, I think it was this day. It was the first full day. That we were just looking off this cliff, and the window's down, and this guy is also kind of just casually glassing, and he comes over, and he's got a 10mm on his chest holster.
Guy.
Starts talking to us. And his buddy, he and his buddies were up there, and his buddy is a certified ambassador for one of the big companies. And he wanted to tell us that, and he wanted to tell us also that it had been foggy that morning, which we knew. And that because it was foggy, they just started drinking Fireball.
Yeah.
And he said, we started drinking Fireball, and someone's like, well, what are we, 16? And I thought, all right, A, what 16-year-old, like, why do you know that?
Yeah.
A, and then B, anytime anybody makes fun of their group when the group's not there, makes me think that it was, like, his idea. So he was probably the one at 9 a.m. who was like, oh, I'm in Alaska.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of fog. Because we got a float plane taking off here. It's authentic Alaska right there. In the, so it made me think that, oh, yeah, it was you. It was you that not only brought that, but that wanted to drink it. And you were probably the only. He said that they were taking naps. He was probably the one that was taking a nap.
Probably passed out.
Probably passed out.
A little different from taking a nap.
Yeah. So now it's mid-late afternoon. I don't know what time it was because the stinking sun doesn't go down until 1 a.m.
No reference to time. That was
no reference
awesome.
to time.
After a couple days.
Yeah. Tells us that some of his buddies were out there, and he was now walking around with, and he had the clip in the 10mm.
Yeah.
Hungover, maybe still drunk. So I don't know, man. You just think, gosh, dang it. So between YouTube guy, other guy, and Kansas guy, I thought this is a mess.
Yeah. What are we doing?
This is a mess, and I expected there to be people because this hunt's been advertised.
Yeah.
It's a unique experience. People had even told us not to go. A friend from down here told you not to go, and then I have some friends in Fairbanks that said, yeah, I mean, it's
a hunt.
It's an experience.
You'll see caribou.
Yeah. So it's kind of what we expected, but then when you actually talk to the people and see that, you think, man, this is going to be crazy.
Well, yeah, and when we started glassing, we saw that bull going down through the little valley there, but then two different groups just go after it at the same time. Yeah. It's like there was no, I don't know, if it were me, just, you got three different guys up there, and then all three of them going to go after it. Well, I mean, if all three of you are going to go after it, then you might as well get a plan. Yeah.
Like,
okay, I'll go over here, and then if you scare it, then I'll be over here waiting for it. Not all three of them go down there independently. Yeah. I don't think either of them talked to each other. It was just like, that's my caribou, I'm going after it.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, that hunter etiquette, I guess, was not very good.
And if you are all in the same group, that's one thing. But if you're in different groups, it's impossible to communicate those sort of things. And that was what was starting to become a little bit, if there's not a whole bunch of caribou around, if they're not in big groups, if you can't just kind of piece off, or if you can't just hike your 5 miles and go and get the job done, are we all just going to be scrambling over the one bull that we see? And the next morning, that's exactly what happened. There was no fog. We woke up and there was no fog, and we see a bull like just down the road from camp.
Yeah, close.
And so I get set up with the spotting scope, and I'm watching that, and you're going down to make a stock. And we talked to these other guys who seemed pretty cool, because he had failed on a stock the previous day.
Yeah, and we picked him up.
And we drove him to his buddies. And he said that someone else had spooked the bull, and then the bull had been spooked to him, and he had almost the opportunity to draw at like 60 yards or something like that, but couldn't. And so, again, that kind of makes this, the first person might not get it. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's the second person that the thing is spooked to, which just seems crazy. So you are going down after this thing. We see the guys take off down the road, and then, I don't know, maybe 5-7 minutes into your stalk, because there's a very small little creek bed with some bushes, so there's enough texture to do something, which was awesome, and that's exactly what we were looking for. And then I see these two guys on the opposite side of the little creek start coming down to the same area, and I look behind me, and their buddy is spotting from maybe 150 yards behind me, so I'm thinking, oh, great.
Yeah.
You are stalking this bull from one area. Two other guys are stalking from, you're stalking from the north, they're stalking from the south, which is kind of weird. Like, we read the wind based on, it seemed like it was coming from the north a little bit, if nothing at all. So I guess when they puffed maybe from higher on the ridge, it gave them an indication that the wind was headed, was north to south. So they thought they were making the right move on the bull. And so everyone's just kind of, I can't see you, I can see them moving in on it. And I see that one guy get really close, and I'm taking pictures, and he just never draws. It looks like he can't be more than 25, 30 yards away, and he just never draws. So what did you see up to this point?
So, yeah, those guys passed us, didn't say a word about the bull, probably because they didn't want us to see it, or maybe they didn't think we saw it, but we saw it. And if they had said right then and there, like, hey, we're going to go after this bull, please don't go screw it up, or what? Don't say, like, don't not go for it. That's my bull.
Yeah.
It's like, come on.
Yeah.
But they didn't say a word, so you spot this bull, and you're like, grab your shit and go. So grab my stuff and go. So then get down in there. And
after years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plans shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
I get down to the little river drainage or the little creek drainage or whatever it was, and it was a bunch of bushes around, and so then I get down in there and I get what I feel is probably 100, 150 yards from where the bull might be. Got down in there and I lost track of him because the brush was so high close to that creek. But and then I poke my head up and I'm looking for this thing. I'm like, where is it? And then I see not one but 2 guys, and I'm like, oh. these are our buddies. So they're going after the bull too. And I was like, well, shoot. And one of the guys actually whistled at me like, I don't know if he was saying like, what the heck, or like, what are you doing down here? Because we're down here. Or if he was saying like, where'd the bull go? Because he kind of put his hands up, and I was like, I don't know. And then I pointed. I was like, I think he's down over here somewhere. I pointed in the direction I thought he was, and then we just kind of went on back to hunting mode, I guess, kill mode. And next thing I know, this bull comes running out of the drainage, and I'm like, okay, well, he's gone there. So he spooks it up the hill behind me, and between you or between where you were set up and where I was. And he was 100 yards from me, I think is what it was, and that's way too far of a shot. So I was like, okay, well, maybe if I pretend to be a little tussock, he hasn't seen me yet, maybe he'll come back down. And we just split the difference between you and I, and that's when he took off. And I was like, well, that gig is up. In between this, I got down to that little drainage. I took off my shoes because I'm wearing a pretty tough boot, and it's pretty loud down, and there's some branches and stuff were crunchy.
Hashtag it.
Yeah, so I'm just like, I'm taking these off. And then I started going down there. The bugs were just eating me alive.
Scarpas, right?
Yeah, Scarpas.
Hashtag Scarpas.
Hashtag Scarpa. Yeah, I was wearing my Scarpa Grand Drews, which is a pretty stiff boot. And it's like, okay, well, get down in there and barefoot. And now my socks are soaked, and this bull runs right away after I see two guys. I'm like, okay, well, there goes that. And kind of had a sour taste in my mouth after that because there were two guys chasing it, and then there was us, and then you went after it, and then there was another guy above you, and I'm like, where are all these people coming from? Like it. So by that time, I was like, okay, we need to get away from some people. So,
yeah.
But
that was when it did spook, and it did spook up the hill because the guy was just on the other side, and so the caribou spooked away, which was up the hill. It maybe knew that there was a camp there, so it didn't totally flee up the drainage. And so I think, oh man, it's on.
Yeah,
so
it could happen.
I left the spotter, put my release on, took my bow and started kind of crawling down because he had disappeared into some texture. And I'm getting closer. Then I see his tips. And then I wait, and then he kind of puts his head down a little bit, walks some more. So I'm just kind of tracing the top of his antlers, and I'm getting as close as I can. And then he finally comes up. I think, oh my gosh, this is 60 yards, and he's standing broadside. And I think, Ryan is right down there. Like, this is exactly where I think he is. He's on the other side of this thing. Who knows where? And I thought, I don't know. And I was also worried about maybe he's in the right spot now for you to take a shot. So I'm thinking, wait, is there going to be an arrow coming up at me? Am I going to shoot an arrow down there, maybe at Ryan? Like, I have confidence. I was just shooting out to 60 very well. It was crazy to have to figure that out, and I didn't take the shot, and it took off a little bit. So we get out of that situation, and sour taste, but we figure that's the way it's gonna run. But we have to get away from the people, especially that spot, because it seemed like people were just waiting at that, like it was a bottleneck or something. They were out that high vantage point. You could see a long way down into the flat tundra to see if something was coming up. And so we ended up doing exactly what we didn't really want to do, was just kind of cover some miles, be willing to drive. And as we were driving, we saw a similar sort of thing happen, and it was the same group of people. Well, it wasn't like the same group of people that we had met, I don't think, but there were two bulls that were moving north, and there were three people who just were kind of all making a move on it. It was like they made this triangle at them. They were trying to figure out where the bucks or the bulls were going to go, and it ended up failing. And part of me was like, I don't even want to watch this. I don't want to watch someone else get a bull. And part of me was also curious about how this thing was going to go down, but it just didn't seem. It seemed like I don't want to say crowding, but it was kind of crowding. They weren't trying to spook it. It was just throw some people at it and see if someone gets a shot.
Yeah.
Which with rifle hunting would be unbelievably.
That'd be scary.
Horribly
scary. That would be
terrible. So, yeah, the middle time was, we drove around a little bit, did some camping. It was fun. Come back late in the evening, have some food, just kind of relax, decompress. Slept for about 5 or so hours a night, 6 hours.
Got up and did it again.
Got up and did it again.
We were up by 5 and having breakfast, and
Yeah.
had our little camp spot. There were other people around, but it was good.
Yeah. Then ended up there. We saw a bull, and then this kind of is jacked up because we see a bull on the edge of this tree line, and we don't see anybody else around, and so we stop and try to make a stalk on it, and it just kind of. We found that sometimes they bump, and it's not necessarily because of pressure. They'll be down feeding, and then start like moving their heads, and then start to get kind of antsy, and then just run for 50 or so yards or so, and it was just they get so sick of the mosquitoes. And by this point, the temperature had risen. So this first 2 days, it was in the upper 30s, low 40s, and now it was in the 60s. So super nice, pretty hot. But then the bugs hatched, and it was brutal. So I kind of get a shot at one, like you're making it work, and I try to get out to this other little road, and it ends up kind of spooking perfectly to me, and I range it at 82, and that is like to my left and up, and it kind of starts kind of hopping towards me, so it's directly out in front of me now. And so if you look at a triangle between where I was and where it was, or where I am and it was, would be like the hypotenuse of a triangle. So now it's right in front of me. And so what is that measurement? If I range at 82, the thing I didn't think it was going to stick around, because it wasn't really sticking around. It was just kind of bumping and upset with the mosquitoes. And so I figured it would be around 60, and it wasn't going to stick around. And so I drew and I shot, and I was left and low. I didn't really settle the pin. I was kind of looking at the caribou itself, just all the classic stupid stuff you're not supposed to do. Not even close to it. I see the fletching just in bed below it. So I think I not only lowered, but I didn't even really get the pin settled on it. So just a total disaster. And the thing took off. So that was, at least we were excited that at least one of us drew on a bull.
Yeah.
And then the next day, we see a small bull in the same area, and you kind of make a little stalk on it, and then I get out of the truck, and it just does this for 1.6 it ended up being. It would just kind of like spook across the road and then back, and then down a little bit and then back. And there was one point where you were on one side of the road, I was on the other, and I had ranged this rock right on the other side of the road, and it was 30 yards. And so when that thing crossed, it was going to be at 30 yards, and it was crossing. And then it was running up the road, almost gets hit by a truck, and then it doesn't come all the way down. I don't know if it saw me or what, but it ends up going back. It was going to come down right perfectly in front at 30 yards, but that didn't happen. It goes to the other side. So more this and that, and ends up being on the road going away from us, and there's a truck behind it, and the truck was trying to get past it, but the caribou wasn't getting off the road, so it was like almost driving it further and further. But it gets off the road, finally starts standing and feeding, and so run for a little bit, walk for a little bit, and then end up crossing the road, and then ranged it at 75, got off the road a little bit, ranged it at 55, and drew and made the shot. And I was like, oh, dude, that felt so good. And I heard it, and I was like, dude, that's a dead caribou. That's a dead caribou. And I put my binos up and looked and saw the little red spot. It was more like touch of liver or touch of lung, mostly liver type area. So, I know, a little better than far back, but back a little bit. And it was just standing there. It took about 10 steps, and it was just standing there. I was like, oh, it's going to fall down right now. So I was like, dude, that's it?
Yeah, from where I was watching, I watched the whole thing, and yeah, you had crept on the other side of the road, staying out of the view, and then you jumped over at some point, and he was just over there feeding, and this was about an hour. We did the cat and mouse, and I think I had decided that I didn't want it at some point in this, and then I said, you go for it if you want to shoot it. And he said, we were like, yeah, I'm going to go for it. So we'll play cat and mouse all day. We got all day. It doesn't get dark here, so we're just going to go for it. And finally, when it came down to the shot, you had gotten over, and I was watching you in my binos. I just had one point, I think I was like 150 yards away, and I just plopped on the side of the road and pulled out my binos, and I'm watching you, and then I'm watching the bull, and then I see you pull out an arrow, knock it, draw back, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. And took your shot, and to me, I heard a big like thwack noise, but to me it sounded like it had hit the dirt. I'm like, oh man, he missed it. So I'm sitting there like, Jeff, put another arrow in it. Like, shoot again, Jeff. What are you doing? And so then I wait, and I'm watching you, and you're not moving like you missed it. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on here. If it was me, I'd try to put the sneak on it, because he had moved probably 10 yards up, and you were just standing there and didn't throw up your arms or anything, just kind of were watching it, which was a good thing. I mean, and then this bull just kind of stands there, and then he does this little wobbly, and I'm looking for blood. I'm like, what is going on here? Like, I couldn't see anything from my point of view, and he's like, starts doing his legs are getting really heavy, so then he does a stumble, and then next thing you know, he falls down. I'm like, oh my gosh, he hit it. That's awesome. So then that's when I walked up, and it's like, good job, and then walked up on it. I was like, oh yeah, you got it, good.
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
It was weird because I didn't know how I'd react. This is the first bow kill I have since a small blacktail a couple years ago. So I didn't know how I was going to respond to, caribou up in the North Slope, and then, just in front of the Brooks Range, and I just felt this. It was like satisfaction. It wasn't like jubilation and oh my gosh, yeah, it was just like, oh my gosh, I'm up here. This is unbelievable. I wasn't like emotional and crying or anything. I was just felt this tremendous satisfaction that we'd come up here, gone all this way, and we'd figured it out, and there had been adversity, and just I'd felt calm about the shot, and I think part of that was I knew I had to stay calm for the shot, and so by staying calm in the shot, it kind of changed maybe the reaction from I'm so psyched for the shot that I'm psyched after the shot. I was just like, oh man, this is so awesome. Just what an unbelievable experience. And I think back to when I was living in California. I think, gosh dang, I'm really glad that I'm living back in Alaska, because these sort of experiences, man, like no one really gets to get. You can go on YouTube and you can Google certain things about caribou hunting, and there's a ton of videos about it. But as far as percentage of the population goes, or even hunters, very few people get to have that experience. And I just felt so happy and satisfied with that. So, and there was no pack.
There was hardly any pack. I think you were probably 100 yards off the road, and the bugs were terrible because the wind just had stopped. There was a little breeze here, a little breeze there, but it was, oh my gosh, the bugs were terrible. So, then I run back and I get your kill kit and the other stuff. What kill kit and water is what I grabbed for you. We had been chasing this thing, and not chasing it, stalking it, but
yeah, so you'd even said, it's got 5-10 minutes till it gets psycho, and it would stand and it would feed, and then head twitch, and then head motion,
body shake,
and then body shake, and then it would take off. It was just the bugs would slowly drive him insane, and he would run around a little bit, but never clearly out of the territory. He would just be out for a little bit.
Yeah, and so then we get yours all butchered up, and that was good. And
next morning
we're
like, all right, let's get Ryan one. We got 2 full days left.
Yeah, that was exciting. So we had woken up at 5 o'clock again, and after celebratory glassing session with a couple brewskis, and then we I think I was heading. Yes. It was about 6 a.m. and things were calling. So and I look up on the mountain where there hasn't been this little lump. And, eyes are still foggy, still waking up. First cup of coffee hadn't hit. I'm like, oh, that's something. So then I run back to the truck, and I got my toilet paper in my hand. And I'm like, Jeff, there's a caribou. And like, where? So then pull out the spotter. And I don't know, looks like a bull. Let's go take care of business. And then let's go check it out. So did the thing and drove down the road, came up with a game plan, and then we started so then we drove down the road probably about 3/4 of a mile, maybe half a mile. Distance is a little off for me.
Mm-hmm.
So then we hiked up this ridge, which we had previously glassed before, because you could just see a lot down in this big valley, and we just figured caribou is going to be around. It should be in this big peaceful valley. And so when we got up there, I don't know how long it took us, but we were hiking with a purpose. I didn't bring spotter. We went light and fast, as we called it. So then we had finally gotten up to where we thought the caribou was, and I don't even think I had my bow off my pack yet. And
Yeah, you didn't get it out there until you left me.
yeah, because I put it on so we can go fast, and then that was a nice little trail. It was in and out of the tussocks, but for the most part fairly compacted down, and there was caribou tracks up and down it. And then we get up there probably about 3/4 to a mile off the road where we think he is, and there's this little hump, and I'm going first and you're behind me, and all of a sudden I see this caribou just staring at me. Oh, so then I tell you, I'm like, caribou, and she's like, huh? And at that point he runs off. I'm like,
You did have your bow off at that point, I think, because that's
Okay.
where we thought he was. And I think you did take him off, and
Okay.
then you walked to the edge and you had your bow. Yeah, because we'd been up there the previous day, and we'd seen that there was this rocky cliff area, and there was the one that was the far one, and it looked like he was going to be at the rocky cliff area. We're going to check that out, and you did have
Okay.
your bow off at that point.
yeah. So from there, it's like, oh shoot, well we just blew that one, because he come up and he was toying around that 75 yards, because he had come up the hill at that point, and then had the bow off, and I was getting ready, and I was taking, and it had a fairly consistent breeze with a little bit of a gust. So then I would range me 73. I'm like, I'm not taking that shot with this wind, and 60 was my cutoff. So I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. And so then he dances around, and I'm doing some things to try to get him to come closer. Putting my bow sideways or just not moving, and just trying to make him think like I'm another caribou, and he's a little smarter than that. And then finally he's just like, I'm out of here, and takes off and goes probably about half a mile to 3/4 of a mile down the valley, maybe, I don't know,
Something like that, yeah.
up to the other spot. And I'm like, well, shoot. So I'm like, what would Jeff do? And in my head I was like, well, I had asked you, I was like, what would Jeff do? I don't know. Actually, I can't remember what you said. But then in my mind, I was like, WWJD, what would Jeff do?
One caribou, one small caribou, and all of a sudden I'm a reference point.
Yeah. Well, I got to have somebody to bounce this off of.
That's true.
A blame point in case, I fail.
Yeah.
So then we kind of hemmed and hawed, and then finally I was like, well, he's over there. He's just feeding, because we were watching him, and he was in the same kind of texture. He was in the middle of these big hills, and, there was a spot to get above him, and then he just kind of bedded up and would get up and bed up, then bed back down. I was like, okay, well, and then it's just like, okay, well, if this was the last day, I'd probably go for him. So, like, I'm gonna go for him. So then we come up with a plan, and you stayed back and watched the whole thing, and then I finally got over there, and I don't know why, but I always feel like I have to take my boots off just so I can be a sneaky ninja. And I had gotten to probably about 200 yards out, maybe 150, and I was just coming up this little hill, and so then I dropped my pack. I think I even dropped my bino harness, and grabbed my rangefinder and my binos, and took off my boots there, and the wind was still consistent in my favor, and I snuck over, and I could get to a point to where I was just sitting there, and there was enough wind to keep my noise down, which the ground was soft, and I could just see through this little hole in the bushes. I could just see him bedded up there, and like, okay, this is cool. But he was facing me, so I couldn't just get up and find a good pocket to shoot at, and it was probably about a 45-degree angle, and I had ranged some stuff around him while I was waiting, and sat there, probably watched him. What did we come up with, about 45 minutes to an hour, something like that?
Yeah, I couldn't take the bugs anymore, so I put the mosquito net on.
Yeah.
I drank some water. I ate my trail mix for the day.
Oh, yeah.
I was texting Abby, letting her know what was going on, which is weird that we had cell phone reception there. Maybe I was on the InReach. I think it was InReach. But, just kind of watching it.
Yeah, so I was watching him, and I was like, okay, he's a caribou. He's going to have to get up eventually. And he was facing me, just feeding, and had his back to the wind. And I could just see him in this little brushy patch. And when I would lean back just to lay down, the bugs would be able to get me. But when I was sitting up, kind of slouched over, there would be enough breeze to where the bugs weren't that bad. So I was like doing that little thing back and forth, and then I was ranging some stuff around him. I was getting 37 to 39 yards, something like that, where I thought he might have been. And finally he stood up, and some things were going across my mind. I was like, well, if I throw a rock and then, I can get him to jump up, but then he's going to be on alert. I was like, no, I had to practice some real patience because I'm not a very patient person. And so then finally he stood up, and I'm like, okay, cool, this is about to happen. And by that point, I had already knocked an arrow, and so then I get on my knees, and I poke my head up above these bushes, and I range, and I can hear him just crunching on grass and eating whatever he's eating, and I can hear him walking, which was pretty cool. And then, so then I range him. I said 39 or something like that. So then on my knees behind this bush, I just drew back and stood up, drawn, and put my 40-yard pin on it. And that's where things got a little squirrely. I don't know what happened, but anyways, long story short, I had one arrow left. And so I could come up with all sorts of excuses, but I'm just going to skip that part. And long story short, I had one arrow left, and he had started feeding up towards me, and I ranged him at 19 yards, and he was just almost even with me, just a little bit on the other side of the hill from where we first started. And none of those other arrows hit him, so like, okay, well, if he runs away, at least he's not injured. But I had this one arrow left, so I was like, this is it. I got to make this one count. So and then he ended up coming. I ranged him at 19, but I think he took a couple more steps towards me. So he had come up this little hill, and finally he was. So I had drawn back again, hopped up on my legs slowly. So I was standing, and then he just popped his head up, and I just put it right there on his chest, and it hit him kind of on the offside shoulder and just almost went through him. The only thing that the arrow stopped on was the inside of the pelvic bone, so it probably would have gone. I'm assuming it would have gone all the way through, but that bolt didn't go less than 10 yards, somewhere from 5 to 10 yards, and he was just dunzo. So it was pretty cool. And then from there, I was like, oh yeah, now it happened. And then I jumped up, and I was like, we got it. And then I could see you were heading this way, and I was like, what in the heck happened? So then I waited for you to come over, and then went and checked him out, and then we went on a little arrow search, and I got two of my arrows back, and then the 3 were off in no man's land. So
that was weird. I was watching, and I saw the bull get up, and I wasn't sure what the distance was. From the picture that I took in my vantage, I thought, man, this could be a long shot, because you were a speck, it was a speck, but there was a little bit of a hump that was where I thought it was, but it was actually past that hump, and so it was a lot closer of a shot. And so when I saw you rise up and miss, and then I didn't see the second shot, the third one was definitely high, and so I thought, oh man. And then I saw it kind of going around the corner, and I thought, oh man, that's it. And I saw you kind of pursue a little bit. So I grabbed my pack, and I started walking toward it, because I thought that it was just going to go off that side, go down the riverbank. And so as I'm making my way through the tussocks, I'm maybe 100 yards from you, 75 yards from you, and I see you jump up. And I was like, oh, maybe that second arrow hit him. I didn't know. I was looking down just to kind of look at my footing, make sure I don't roll an ankle in the tussocks, and I was missing the whole drama of you coming back and the caribou coming back up, and that whole thing I missed because I had to look at where I was watching. I wouldn't be able to see that because look at that school of humpies or something like that, just going nuts right there.
Oh yeah,
could be silvers too.
Cool.
I missed the whole thing. I wouldn't be able to see the caribou because it was down kind of off that other side, but yeah, that was jubilation.
Yeah, that was I'm not sure what was going on. I still don't know what was going on. Yeah, there's so many things I could blame it on. Yeah, because we had shot 2 days before, and
money.
It was good. Before this trip, I didn't shoot at any sort of inclines. In the past, I've gotten up on my roof because I got a pretty good ladder, and my roof's not steep or anything like that, so it's safe. But then I set up my target, and it's a fairly good incline. It's probably about 45 degrees, and I can just draw back, and I can just shoot at my targets from where they sit, and it's all been good. But for some reason, it didn't pop in my mind to shoot at any sort of angle. Take my targets up the mountain or whatever. But yeah, so I'm not sure what was going on. But anyway, we
Got 'em.
got the bull. We took some pictures, punched my tag, and it was cool. And pulled out the arrow. That was pretty cool. First, I guess, frontal shot I've ever taken, and that was pretty good. And just total annihilation of the insides.
Yeah.
It got lung, diaphragm, liver, intestine, and surprisingly, it wasn't messy at all. You know, I was like, this is going to be stinky and bad, but
it was high enough to just devastate, because it was on the incline as he was coming up, so it was high enough to devastate all the vital organs without puncturing into the guts, and that is such a traumatic, damaging shot. That
so fast
thoracic opening or whatever, like we have just above our rib cage. I mean, that's a horrible place to have anything happen to you. And I know Corey Jacobson has a couple. Like, he explained it, I think, in one. I think some other people have explained, and he's taken some of those shots on elk at very close ranges, and at 19 yards, very little decline. It was a much different shot than the previous ones. But yeah, you make that shot, like that's going to put it down pretty easily.
That was pretty cool. It was pretty cool, and I'm really glad I didn't put that last arrow to waste. Probably would have just called it a day after that and just said, let's go back. Sulked and whined, and who knows. But it turned out good, and then you grabbed half the meat, and I grabbed the antlers and half the meat, and made it back to the truck, and I forgot my trekking poles, and you let me borrow one of yours, which was cool, and then we made a nice, good little hike back, took a couple little breaks, and it was good. Really glad we had that trail to go back, because them tussocks, man. Whew.
Yeah, it was just enough of a trail to kind of knock it down, and we knew it was going to be tough, and it did suck. And we were still moving at 1.5 miles, 2 miles an hour. Like, we were still moving pretty good.
Yeah.
So it was, if you look at, when people from down south come up here and they're looking at going up the sides of mountains, just the thickness of things is so brutal, and getting through alders, and then the footing in muskegs is just horrible, and the steepness and all that stuff is just a lot more than you expect. And once you hunt down south a little bit, you see that there's a lot of gaps between the trees. The trails are pretty good. A lot of times you're on groomed trails, and we get in that too. Like, sometimes we'll go up mountains that have trails, or we'll access these sort of things with some trail, and it's brutal. But not having that footing was pretty rough. Something to definitely think about. It wasn't going to deter us at all, but it was just
I will say this, that I definitely underestimated the tussocks. Like, it's flat. It's just, how bad could it be? It's got to be muskeg. Me being ignorant, and I've only hiked on muskegs, and I was like, it's got to be just like that. How hard could it be? Tough guy, and well, it put me in my place.
Yeah. Some of the spots were worse than others. I found that for the most part, you could kind of walk between them. If you step on the top of them, you're going to fall, you're going to roll your ankle, whatever. So you don't walk on the top of it. Same thing with, like, when people are walking on the beach, they walk on top of the rocks. I'm like, dude, you're going to fall. Absolutely, you're going to fall every single time, unless it's super, super dry and you have good boots on, like you can hop over the tops of rocks. So I was just walking kind of between the tussocks, so it made for, awkward steps sometimes, but for the most part, it wasn't so bad. But there were a couple spots where it was real bad, and the footing was horrible, and sometimes you try to step between them, and it's a deeper hole it was pretty rough.
Yeah, I think the first hike out where we went to that 5 miles, I think that was probably the worst of it, which was crazy because it was just flat ground. But there was just the standing water of duck ponds, and just water draining into it's just so flat. It's like, it's so interesting, but I'm definitely glad we experienced it. So that's good. Yeah,
that was cool. And it was cool. You got yours and I got mine within 12 hours of each other. So it was in the afternoon, evening. I got mine. You got yours in the early morning, and then we had a whole day to get back to Fairbanks, and then couple grayling on the way home to fish, to kind of round out the trip with some fishing. That was cool, and then helped Harrison on his cabin, which is pretty sweet.
That was fun.
Some campfires and some hauling of logs and a lot of BSing around the fire. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was good. It was great. So should we talk about our getting the meat back, or?
Yeah, in the interest of full disclosure, I guess probably good. But we didn't really think that thing through. The things that I knew in my head was when we got back to Fairbanks, and also I didn't want to we're going to go up there, shoot the bulls, and come back. It's like, this is, an archery hunt. It's a different thing. And, I haven't taken 15, 20, 30 animals with my bow. And so in the back of my head, I thought, we're going to put it on dry ice, and
it'll be good to go.
We're going to air cargo it back. Like, it didn't even require a whole bunch of extra planning because that was just what's going to happen. It was going to be pretty easy. So when we were out of ice, and then we got to Fairbanks, and there was only one place with dry ice.
Only open from Monday to Friday.
Only open Monday through Friday, and the Alaska Air Cargo was not open, so that kind of put things at a bit of a disadvantage. We kept the meat cold by, we bought some more ice and bought some cold packs and got those frozen. Harrison volunteered his freezer, so we were able to get those frozen and cold and whatnot. So, and then another issue was the melted ice, and we had it in the game bags. We got it cooled down. And then put it in a garbage bag, but the garbage bag leaked a little bit, and so there was some water that got in, and so mine was kind of sitting in this cold water for a little bit, which is too bad. So we got it dried out, so that was kind of unfortunate. But a little better planning on our part, I guess, having a cooler with just ice and not ice and food, and that was part of the issue. Opening the cooler, getting food out and whatnot.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it. My brain was, we get 3 free check bags in Alaska, and if we get one, cool, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, which was not the best planning on our part because I just figured, Fairbanks being a bigger city, things would just be open all the time just because it's a big city. But, 2 of the most important spots were closed. And I think even if we had done all that on Friday, would have been, I don't know if Alaska Airlines can keep our meat cold, so wait for us to come back here and then pick it up, because I wouldn't want my wife to pick it up. The one cooler was over 150 pounds, or right around in there, and so then we start doing a little bit of research, and it's like, okay, well, we can't have anything weigh over 100 pounds, so now we're thinking,
and that was the biggest oversight. The other stuff was like, well, whatever, but not having a checked baggage over 100 pounds was. I may have known that, but I just didn't, think of that.
I didn't have a clue until we read it, and then I called Alaska Airlines and said, whoops, we should have done more research.
Yeah, and we kept the bone in, too, which added some weight to it.
Yeah.
Because even though they were small bulls, you add in the bone weight, and those are animals that are going to put on pounds. So they have a heavy frame.
Yep.
So they're pretty big.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. The another plane going by. The shoulders on them were like the backstrap, the spine bone in between the shoulders. That was a lot like a mountain goat, where it just rose really high compared to everything else, which was really cool. But back to the coolers. Yeah, so we had to go get 2 coolers, and then we had to ice them up, get them cold, and we went and bought some gel packs. And luckily we got all of our meat back, and it turned out good. One cooler weighed, I think, 80 pounds, and then the other one weighed 78.5 pounds, and there was probably about less than 10 pounds of gear in one of those coolers, and then the cooler weight. So I didn't actually weigh out my meat when I got back, but ended up with 42 pounds of burger and just a bunch of back straps, steaks and roasts. So it tastes good.
Nice.
It's great.
The meat's good, super tender. Fantastic. That was another thing too. I didn't want to leave anything with Harrison or Steve to be like, hey man, can you take this to the thing, and or just invade their coolers. They're the type of people who would have offered that and did offer that, but you don't want to just put people in that position. Well, and that's hunting down here for blacktail. It's so easy to just you go out, you get it home, hang it for a day. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So when your entire hunting career is essentially that, and then one mule deer or a couple of mule deer trips down in Wyoming where it was so cold that it was going to freeze. You just leave it outside, it's going to freeze. And the previous caribou hunt I did with Harrison up there was the same thing. We had to keep it inside to keep it from freezing, so we could process it. Because we just gutted it, cut it in half, got it back to Fairbanks, kept it thawed, and then took it outside and got it off the bone. But yeah, it's just a different thing. I figured it would be pretty easy, and it was a little more stressful than it should have been.
Yeah. But now we know for next time. And just those guys were just so accommodating already, Steve and Harrison, and I just didn't want to take advantage of that, because you're right, they would have just whatever you need. But it's we can figure this out. So But yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, you don't necessarily get that in a lot of places. The hunting community can be super, super accommodating, helpful, friendly. It can also be just a bunch of jerks that, can't wait to criticize for whatever. Oh, you should have been prepared. You should have known this. Oh, well, I go Alaska. I do this. Well, that's great. It's amazing that you've never had any sort of foul up. And like even 2 days before we left when
Kansas.
Yeah,
that's what we nicknamed him.
Yeah. Before I even left here, when I was shooting my bow and I derailed the string.
Oh, yeah.
And how Bo took it that day and then got it fixed so I could shoot, the next day and kind of get that confidence back up. Like, I thought, man, I could develop a serious hitch if this thing is gonna. If I'm worried about this derailing every time I pull back, that could really
that could be bad,
impact the whole thing. But he went out of his way to make sure he got that done.
Yeah,
got it restringed, got a new peep in there and everything. So, and his primary job is not archery guy.
Mm-hmm.
He just helps other people out, and so there's a lot of people who are very accommodating and help you out. It makes you want to reciprocate. It makes you want to help other people out too, which is really good.
Yeah.
All the while, people just can't wait to tell you how irresponsible certain shots are, how you should have done this, or I can't believe you shot that. Those guys are pricks.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, it was good though.
It's fun.
Yeah, I think I'd do it again. I would like to do it when there's no bugs. Bugs were just miserable. But yeah, it was good. We didn't see as many caribou because I guess we were early for the migration, so it's probably happening pretty good right now.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
harsh winter, late winter, and then that was another thing too, that you look at some of the YouTube videos and people are crossing the rivers.
Yeah,
and that may have been, but there's a huge difference between crossing a river in early August and late August. You give it a couple more weeks, and then you don't know where they're crossing it. So it's not just a matter of being a badass and then crossing the river because, that's what you got to do, man. You just got to cross the river. Well, it had snowed the week before, and when you're draining such a massive amount of land, you're going to get a lot of water. And then with the rain, between the melting snow and the rain, there's a lot more water in there. Some of the people were remarking about how there was a lot more water. You could see when we were going through the tundra that there was green grass that was partially submerged, which again is an indication there's a lot more water than usual. And so if you think because you saw a YouTube video that it's just a matter of crossing the river, but you're not gauging the fact that, hey, last week there was a lot of water around here.
That's a good way to get in trouble.
And that it was a really, really bad winter, which means that there's more snow that's melting. And that's, it goes into the wild, how Chris McCandless got into the bus when the water was low, and then the water came up for runoff, and that's one of the reasons why he was trapped. Just that sort of stuff happens. People don't understand how wild these things are. The rivers aren't regulated by dams and whatnot, and so those are the types of things that can get you in trouble.
Yeah, and we didn't even see any caribou over there, so it was like, why take that risk? And it was just, in my mind, it was moving pretty good, and just wherever we looked, I was like, I'm not doing that. Let's stay on this side.
I'm not sure what river that the sag meets up with, but even when it was just the sag, it looked like it was pretty thick, and you can't see the bottom, and it's pretty swift. And you had an instance last year when you were on a sheep hunt where you were contemplating crossing a river.
Yeah, and being unfamiliar with that part of Alaska, wasn't as big as a sag, but it was definitely it was a good flowing creek, and it was draining out of a big drainage, and it was that muddy, silty water where you couldn't see the bottom, and it was flowing really good. And we're like, well, there's sheep right on the other side, so get to the edge, and then we poke it with our trekking pole just to see how deep it would go. And it's like, well, shoot, that's 3 feet deep right there. What's it in the middle? And this was probably 25 foot wide creek. And I'm like, yeah. So I text some buddies that have been in that country, and they've ran into this before, and it's like, well, what would you do? I mean, what do you recommend? Just being totally green. It's like, yeah, you're talking yourself into a bad situation. That's usually the time to just turn around. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't go for it. We walked up and down the creek there a little ways, and just trying to find a better spot. And it just didn't seem worth it. And me and my buddy agreed. It's like, yeah, no. And then we get back, and then we get back to where we've flown out of, and the guy's like, yeah, we just go for it. I'm like, I'm not taking that chance. I want to stay upright. And and then we get back home, and then a week later, I have another friend. He texted me an article. A sheep hunter had probably, within 50 miles of where we were, he he had tried crossing and he didn't make it. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, good call on not doing that, because this is the kind of risk that you take. And I was like, it's sad, but yeah, I don't regret not crossing it. How about that? So,
Yeah.
No, so yeah, definitely scary. You definitely got to weigh your risks. So.
Yeah, and you have to look at what your experience is. Like, I've been on some mountains and, it's super, super slick and super, super steep, but you just say, okay, yes versus no. It doesn't mean that, you can talk yourself out of anything. Like, tomorrow it's going to rain. Because it's going to rain, it's going to be cold, and, it might be slick, and so I'm not going to go out on this hunt. Like, that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's just that difference between stupidity and that, and I think part of it is, you see so many people are willing to do that, and people are desperate for content or whatnot, and so maybe in order to write their chapter, they do things that might not be safe. And there are times other people are like, oh man, this is totally safe. Based on my capabilities, my wading abilities, based on the situation where I was going to cross, it's a great call, and absolutely do that.
Well, that, and then, you get the guys that just push it until, it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. It's like, yeah, it's just scary. It's not worth it in my opinion. We go up a lot of steep stuff around here, but if there's nothing to grab onto, like when you're going up some of that steep stuff, don't go up it. It's just stupid. Yeah. You know you're going to fall. So, I don't know.
I think part of that is living in Southeast Alaska. I know for sure, I'm pretty sure that you have known someone who's been fishing who went out in weather that wasn't supposed to be that bad, and they maybe pushed marginal weather and then put themselves in a situation. Like I've, growing up here, about people who we've lost out on the ocean. People have been put in difficult situations up on mountains, and it can go really severe really, really quick.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an unfortunate, sad reality of living here. And so it doesn't mean that you're scared. It just means that you keep certain things in mind, and like you said, you don't want to be talking yourself into something that you shouldn't end up doing.
Yeah. And then, prep for the worst and hope for the best.
That's right.
And then just making wise decisions when you're out there is just, I don't know. That's part of the reason why, I carry a tarp now, and then, my possible skid is just a little bigger than it needs to be. I got some tablets that I'll probably never use, but they're there, and then my med kit is pretty minimal, but it's just about being ready. So MacGyvering something when you need to, an arm splint or something, and having my inReach now, which never would have thought before. It's like, yeah, you're Southeast. You're like just a boat ride away from home after a hike. It's like, no. It's not just you, you got people back home that you have to go home to, which sounds a little dramatic, but I don't know.
It should be somewhere in the thought.
Yeah, it's got to be somewhere in the back of the mind, so which is good. Carry 2 GPSs, which one is just primarily the inReach, but I figured if I'm buying an inReach, I might as well get another GPS with it, so I just went with the bigger model, and then we got our Onyxes, which can still run out of batteries. It's like, oh, well, now what do? You get into fog and you got to get down the mountain. It's like, well, did you flag it? No.
That's the problem with all-in-one. If you lose one, you got to lose it all.
Exactly. Yeah.
But one of these weeks, I'll get my own sheep tent from Kafaro.
Yeah. Hopefully soon.
Yeah. Ordered it first week of May.
It's nice for those days in the rut where it's just kind of misty, or where like it's not rainy when you go out, but there's going to be the little storms that come through. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's just like set that thing up, and
I was checking the mail today, and I thought, man, please today.
This is it.
Because tomorrow it's supposed to rain. It's supposed to rain the whole next week, and this is prime alpine deer season. It's been hot for the last week. So tomorrow, as soon as there's some liquid, it's going to be on. The deer pop is going to be ridiculous.
Oh, after this hot stretch?
Yeah. It's going to be so good tomorrow. With a little bit of rain, it's going to be perfect, and I will not have my sheep tent. But
yeah, I'm going fishing tomorrow, but I hope you get one.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
I hope you get some.
Yeah,
so.
Hopefully.
All right, well, we'll call that episode 3 or whatever this is. So Caribou recap, a lot of fun. Good job. Fun.
Yeah, thanks.